welcome back to my show. If you guys didn't already hear in yesterday's episode, I had told you that I'm going to be having 4 amazing authors coming up this week, back to back. So it's going to be amazing, fun for you guys, fun for me. So let's get into it. Today's guest is really special. Her name is Rajani LaRocca. Hi Raji, how are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
On the show today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm excited.
So first off, let's get started with you introducing yourself and maybe talking a little bit about your latest book.
Yes. So my name is Rajani LaRocca. I'm an author and a doctor, and I live in the Boston area. And my latest book is a picture book called I'll Go and Come Back. It's actually the first book I ever sold way back in March of 2018, and it just came out at the end of March in 2022. So sometimes books take a long time to come out, but it's worth it. And it is a story about a little girl named Jyoti, and her family is from India, and she goes to India to visit them, but she feels a little bit lonely and homesick. And then her grandmother, or Pati in Tamil, sees her feeling lonely and helps her by playing games with her and cooking with her and eating with her. And then the next year, the grandmother comes to visit Jyoti in America, and she feels lonely and homesick, and Jyoti helps her. And the title is from a Tamil phrase, so where we don't say goodbye, we say I'll go and come back. And that was the inspiration for the book.
That's amazing. It sounds like so. Is this a middle grade book or a picture book? What is it?
It is a picture book.
That sounds amazing. So, all the young writers out there, if you are in the age demographic of picture books, or even like if you're 12 or 13, you can still read picture books. You're never too old to read picture books, right?
Exactly. I think picture books are for everyone, age 0 to 101.
Yeah, I've seen people, even adults, read picture books, right? Some read,
absolutely.
Like, I've seen picture books on sensitive topics as well as like childish topics and like things that you can really connect to.
Absolutely.
Because picture books, according to me, instead of saying according to me, let me ask you this question actually. When someone reads a picture book, do you feel like they connect more when they see illustrations or without illustrations?
Well, here's the thing. I only write, right? So I don't illustrate. I think that an illustrated book is the best way to experience a picture book. But in order for a picture book to exist, because a lot of us are writers and not illustrators, it has to be a story that is visualizable with just the words. So that's what's interesting, is that I write a story and I think about what illustrations might go with it, but I don't really have a fixed idea. And then the illustrator comes along and creates half the story. And a lot of times they add so much, and they add things that I didn't expect. And so it's even more fun. It's kind of a discovery for me as well.
Yeah, I feel like what you said is very true, because like pictures can add more, because like in a middle grade book, most necessarily they do not have colored photos or even have any photos, maybe a few illustrations here and there. Like Roald Dahl has a few, but many people, as soon as they see the length of Roald Dahl, they kind of like shiver away from it, mainly because they do not feel like reading that long, even if it's nice and entertaining. So like that's why even the middle grade is started towards 8 to 12 years old. 8-year-olds kind of tend to stay away from Roald Dahl when they see like a heavy big book, because unless of course they're an avid reader, which is a different case. But I feel like they tend to shy away from those kind of books because they hardly have like colorful, eye-catching photos and illustrations.
Yeah. But similarly, even though some kids feel like they're too old for picture books, there's a lot you can learn from picture books. So, and some of them are quite sophisticated in terms of language, because we write them so that adults can read them to children, right? So there are a lot of interesting things you can do with picture books.
Yeah, I guess I heard this somewhere. I think one of the authors I interviewed in previous episodes, they said that whatever you write, it should be something that the parents or the care or the gatekeepers would be comfortable with giving to the children.
Yeah,
You do not want
absolutely.
to write something, especially if it's a picture book, even if you're writing a sensitive topic for young kids to understand, you should write it in a way which is appropriate for the age demographic.
Yep, absolutely.
So on to my next question, which is that why did you decide to write about Indian protagonists?
Why did I decide to write about Indian protagonists? Well, because I'm Indian American. So I grew up in the US, but I was born in India, and my whole extended family lived in India. I'm an only child, so it was me and my parents in the US for a very, very long time. But we went back to India every few years to visit our extended family. So when I was growing up, I never saw any books with people like me in them. And I mean, that's true in the US, but it's also true in India, because when I grew up, I read in India, I read a lot of stories about people, Indian people in India, which was different from what I was experiencing. So that didn't bother me when I was growing up. I read lots of books about all kinds of people and really kind of learned about all kinds of people and loved books anyway. But I don't think I realized what I was missing until I was a grown-up and finally read a book with a protagonist that was like me. So Indian heritage, but growing up in the US. And that was really mind-blowing and world-changing for me. So when I started to write, I did not have any intention of writing about particular people, only particular people, but it turns out that what I wanted to write about was people who were like me. So that's what I ended up writing about. And I think that it's been really fun to explore all the different stories you can write. And I write stories that are lighthearted, and I write stories where somebody's Indian heritage is not kind of an issue at all. It's just kind of part of who they are. I write stories that are more serious and emotional, and maybe they're struggling with some things about being the child of immigrants. And I write about Indian kids who like to bake and who want to be doctors and who would love to play baseball and who like math. And I write picture books about all kinds of families. So it's been really fun. And because as you know, being Indian or being an Indian American does not mean that we're all one thing, right? We're just as varied as any other people on the planet. So it's been really fun telling all of these stories.
Yeah, I feel like with Indian protagonists, it can really like influence the outside world, since like they really get to know what you're experiencing. It can put you in the shoes of other people who may not certainly be of the same culture or race as you. So it's
Absolutely.
a good thing, especially like for example, some people, even if they're not Indian, they tend to write books with Indian protagonists in it. Which I feel like if you're doing that, you should probably research or talk to someone in that area, because you do not want to somehow, by mistake or purposely, or do anything which could hurt someone.
Absolutely, you're right.
Like for example, like in the olden times, there are a few books. I've read a few books. I mean, I'm not from the olden times. I was born in the 2000s, but like there are a few books which are still out here from the past, with like ways they described Indians as really bad. Like they have really bad descriptions of how Indians look. Like they have the same, like they think of them as Native Americans, which is totally different, because Native Americans are not exactly Indians. They're completely different categories of people.
Yeah, it's hard when there are books written about people that use stereotypes rather than actual what people are really like. Absolutely.
So my next question is on the lines of stereotypes, right? Like, have you ever dealt with stereotypes yourself, and how has it influenced your writing or you as a person?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So, I mean, I think, yes, sometimes you feel like somebody meets you and before they even really get to know you, they've formed an opinion of you. I think that happens to lots of people. I also think that, growing up with a group of people and realizing how much diversity there is within your own community is so different from the way kind of the rest of the world assumes you might be. So, some of the examples I've used that have come out in my books are, for example, in Red, White, and Whole, there's a classmate who asks the main character, Reha, if she speaks Indian, which of course, as we know, is not like, that doesn't even make any sense as a question, because like there is no Indian language. There's so many languages in India. And Reha kind of thinks of all these things about how none of that makes sense. And she's so overwhelmed with all the thoughts in her head that she doesn't say anything, like she doesn't explain anything. She just says no. And it's interesting, right? So, it's hard, I think, for a lot of people to comprehend a country that has as many languages and cultures and religions as India. But, it's true. And then, one of the other things I talk about in Much Ado About Baseball is, there's sometimes stereotypes of Indians all being really good students or really good at math or, something like that. And there is a kid in that story who is kind of struggling with math, and his dad is kind of not happy about it. And one of the other characters, Trish, asks her dad, she's like, well, if I weren't good at math, would you be upset? And he's like, of course not. And she's like, well, why is my friend's dad so upset? And he kind of explains to her, he's like, it's different when you are an immigrant to this country and you feel like the only reason you were able to immigrate is because you had a job in a certain kind of field. So you have to be really good at that field. But, and then he shares that he had the same struggles growing up in his family, but then ultimately, and his parents only wanted what was best for him, but ultimately that they realized that he didn't have to follow the same path that they did in order to achieve success. So these are interesting kinds of topics that kind of go against stereotypes, and that I thought was not only important to include, but it was also kind of fun to write about.
Yeah, I feel like all of these things, if you include them in a book, or indirectly or directly, it could actually help others understand how we struggle, or how anyone coming from an immigrant status is coming with like the struggles of how they feel like when people do not accept them for who they are and classify them as different things, which are probably not true.
Absolutely.
Because another stereotype I've heard is that all Indians play cricket and know cricket by heart, which is like, I think, the most common one, I think.
Yeah, I always have to have cricket explained to me because I keep forgetting how to play it or even watch it. But it is fun. It's fun. I mean, it's fun to actually sit with someone who knows about the game and watch a game, but I can't ever keep it straight in my head because I don't watch enough of it.
Yeah, I feel like that's one of the common ones though. Also, if I may ask, this was like a random question which I thought I might throw in there, which was that what was the first book you read with an Indian protagonist on the cover of the book?
Oh, I mean, so other than the Amar Chitra Kathas that I read in India, right? Which
yeah, the one which are like
yeah.
in an American or any different place which is not India but with Indian protagonists.
So so that's interesting. So when I was a teenager, I read The Jewel in the Crown, which was set during the British Raj in India. And I mean, it was an adult book, so it's not like it necessarily had a cover that had people on it, but it was set in India and some of the main characters were Indian. But of course that was historical fiction, right? But the first time I read a book with an Indian American protagonist, which is what, that's what I am, was Jhumpa Lahiri's book, The Namesake. And I mean, I had read her short story collection, Interpretive Melodies, already, but The Namesake was the first time I read a novel with an Indian American protagonist that I was just blown away.
For me, my first book, the first book I read, which had an Indian protagonist, was Arusha and the End of Time series.
Oh, great! Yeah, those are great books.
Yeah, and really then after that, soon after I read that, I read The Serpent Secret,
Yes, that's a wonderful book too. Absolutely.
And then I read Arusha, I mean not Arusha, We Are in the Blood of Nectar.
Wonderful. Awesome. Also a great book.
Yeah, I interviewed the author. Fun. I feel like all the authors I talk to teach me something new. Like right now we talked about stereotypes and how they affect us as a person and also affect our writing, how you can add it in. Some other authors talk how their illustrating process works. Some authors talk about how writer block works and how they face it. So like I feel like everyone has their own views on different topics. Like if I ask the same questions I asked today to some other author, they would have different answers because no two answers are the same. So my last and final question for you before we end this conversation is like, do you have any advice for aspiring young writers?
Yes. So my first piece of advice is to read a lot, because in order to be a good writer, you have to be a good reader first. And read whatever you like. Like, you don't have to read specific things, just read whatever you like. And then the second thing is to make sure to have some time where you're not in front of a screen, you're not consuming somebody else's kind of stories necessarily, but like to just think or do nothing. Like, make sure you have some time to like go outside and like be in nature, or like walk your dog, or just talk with a friend, because those are the times when your imagination gets going. And then my third piece of advice is to write, and to not worry too much about it being perfect, not worry too much about it being like finishing it at a particular time, but just to write a little bit and let it be a time that you enjoy. So when you enjoy something, your brain thinks, oh, I like this, I need to keep doing it. So then you will keep doing it. So make writing something that you love to do.
That's some great advice. I wish we could keep talking, but I'm afraid we're short on time. So I had a great time having you here. I'm pretty sure everyone learned something really nice today.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun talking to you.
I'm so glad to hear that. So anyways, guys, that's the end of the episode. I hope you all learned something new and enjoyed. So keep reading, keep writing, and have a nice day. Bye, guys.